Beginning in Judges chapter 6, we are introduced to the character Gideon. And the story that surrounds him is really a fascinating story. Gideon is the typical unlikely hero, but he finds himself involved in something very big very quickly. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hey, my name is Noah Dieselkamp, and the purpose of this channel is to teach about God, about Jesus, and about the Bible. So I'm glad that you're here today, and I pray that this video encourages you and benefits you in your walk with Christ. Now, this particular channel has a particular purpose, and that is to connect with people in the greater Austin area. I live in the North Austin area, and I like to connect with people and talk with them about God, about Jesus, and about the Bible, so that we can serve Him better together. So if you live in the Austin area, please, by all means, reach out. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to find a way to connect with you, whether in person or online, so that we can better serve God together. With that, let's get back into Judges chapter 6. That's where we're introduced to Gideon, and he's a self-proclaimed nobody. He's from the weakest clan of his tribe. He's the least in his father's household. He says, I'm nobody. But God comes to him. And he tells him, hey, I want you to tear down the idols in your father's house. And he does that. And he earns a nickname in the process, which means, will Baal contend with him? He had gone up against a false god, Baal, and won. Now, not long after this, Gideon actually musters an army of 32,000 to fight against surrounding nations who have the intention of attacking Israel. And they have a much larger army, but Gideon manages to put together an army of 32,000. And then at God's command, he whittles that down to just 300 men, less than 1% of his original army's size. And with these 300 men, Gideon completely routs, completely defeats the opposing army. It's an incredible scene, and it's not hard to picture what happens next, is it? They lift him up on their shoulders. They cheer. They say, for the Lord and for Gideon. You can hear the chants in your mind as you picture this. The cheers in the background. Make him king. And they tell him, you rule over us. Your son, your grandson also. They want to make Gideon their king. But Gideon, noble as he is, says to them, no. The Lord will be your king. Now, that's a story. That's a hero. And boy, we wish the story ended there. On the heels of this victory, Gideon begins to lose his way. He creates a gold ephod, and we don't know what his intentions were in creating it. The ephod was traditionally a way of communicating with God and finding out God's will. And so perhaps he was acting in line with his intention. The Lord will rule over you. This is how we will determine his will. Regardless of what his intentions were, though, this gold ephod became the very thing he had originally been trying to destroy. It became an idol to him, to his house, to the entire nation of Israel. And so he leads Israel right back into the thing that he had been trying to destroy, idolatry. This is the story of a fallen hero. A hero that at some point does a 180 and finds himself opposed to the very things he fought for, the causes and the beliefs that he held. And he opposes them. We know these stories. We can see them repeated throughout history and throughout fiction. Just a glance at pop culture, and we can see this same type of story repeated. In Star Wars: Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan says to Anakin, you have become the very thing you swore to destroy. In the movie The Dark Knight, this idealistic politician, Harvey Dent, foreshadows his own fate when he says, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. We're familiar with this idea of the fallen hero. But there's a difference in this historical account that we find in Judges 6 and 7. There's a really key difference that we find there. So if you're not there already, turn to Judges chapter 6, because here's the key difference between the story of Gideon and anything we can find in pop culture. In the story of Gideon, Gideon was never the hero. Look again in Judges chapter 6, verse 14. Gideon was an unlikely hero, but he was chosen. He was chosen by God. In chapter 6, verse 14, the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you?" Gideon wasn't the hero. He had been selected by God to serve in this role. So he was an unlikely hero because he wasn't the hero. And even once he became the quote-unquote hero of Israel, he only was that because he had followed God's direction. Look in chapter 7, Judges chapter 7, verse 9. That same night the Lord said to him, "Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand." Gideon wasn't the hero of the story. As long as Gideon did things according to God's instruction, he did well. But as soon as he diverted from that, he stopped being the hero of the story. And that's important for us to recognize. It's important for us to recognize that God was the real hero of this story, because it means that the fate of Israel and the deliverance of Israel was never in the hands of some weak, fallible man such as Gideon. Rather, it was in the hands of the unfailing hero, God himself. And similarly, today, we need to recognize this, because our deliverance, our salvation is not in the hands of some, again, weak or fallible or flawed human being who has as many problems as we do. Our deliverance, our salvation is in the hands of Jesus, the King, the perfect one, God himself. He is our Savior. He is our deliverer. He is the hero. And he is made no less powerful when we fail, and we will fail. So who's the hero? Do we try to save ourselves? Or do we trust in God, who is victorious, who has always been victorious, and who always will be victorious? Who's the hero? The best decision that Gideon ever made was to put his trust in God and follow his commands. And the worst decision that Gideon ever made was to then turn back and to put his trust in the influence and the power and the prestige that humans had to offer. Who will we trust? Who's the hero?